The first patch after the release of the Umbar expansion is here for LOTRO, and relevant to my recent videos, I think it's a step in the right direction to fixing some of the launch issues with Umbar. Now, if you are interested, I will have in a future video a lot more thoughts on the general Umbar experience and maybe how the launch experience has been different from other expansions and community reactions. While this is a minor patch, there are a few important things to get to, and I first want to point out how this is actually a step in the right direction for the Umbar expansion experience. And one of the first is actually going to be related to crafting. As I talked about in my recent videos, the crafting overhaul has basically been missing a lot of things and felt half implemented at most. And I personally thought one of the bigger issues was just the lack of communication. It's okay if things have to be delayed, but there was just no official word from Standing Stone Games on any of that. So the expectations did not match the reality at all with the expansion launch. But actually what we have in this patch doesn't even relate to that. So as far as missing things in the overhaul, the first thing I do want to highlight here is that the Forester event, they are still hoping to bring that back perhaps by the end of this year or early next year. And then we also expect to be able to have a single tracking skill for multiple gathering professions. That's also now on the future release list, potentially for December or early January. In other places, they have also addressed that you cannot actually gather any tier material when you're supposed to, and that's also on this future development list. And then if you are curious about the lack of guild crafting profession and guild quests and different things like that, I have not seen any official comments on that, so it is still presumably just delayed like the other features. So you may be wondering, if this update doesn't actually implement any of those delayed features, well, what is actually here that is a step in the right direction? Well, that is the ingredient requirements for the Umbar crafting recipes. That's going to be adjusted, and they say for most recipes require fewer ingredients. So if you are not familiar, the base crafted recipes that you have for your different crafting professions in the Umbar tier for level 141 yellow armor, that requires 3 of the rare crafting ingredients and also 30 of the processed materials for whichever profession that is. And for these pieces, the changes in the patch is that you won't actually require any of the rare crafting materials and potentially reduced regular resources. So the details on these changes are here, but I have to wonder how these were even proposed levels in the first place. But hey, at least they're very quickly enacting changes because of the huge community pushback on this. So for most output craft recipes, this will result in a reduction of refined materials, and then the uncommon gear will require 0 of the rare crafting ingredient, the red sea stones, and then the rare gear recipes that you'll get from barter reputation. I believe there are scrolls, which I have to make a video about that at some point in the future, but these will require 1 or 2 of the red sea stones for you to craft, and they should be consistent across all different crafting professions, because I know for woodworker, for example, their base level 141 gear that they can craft actually doesn't require any of these red sea stones, so that will be consistent after this update as well. I still think there's a long way to go with the crafting revamp and the Umbar tier, but at least at this point we have had some communication and do have a start to changes here. I also find it really odd though that the battle scrolls will be from the Umbar reputation faction instead of just being a base part of the scholar profession, because that's such a core element to scholars, being able to craft battle scrolls. So that to me is a bit odd, unless they're just a better tier of battle scrolls than a default one that's already there, but I've heard there are issues of them just not being in game at the moment. But moving on, there are actually a couple other spots where this update is pushing Umbar in the right direction, and the first one is you will be able to do Umbar tasks once again, because if we go to the Umbar task boards, you will see that we don't actually have any tasks available here, so you will have those again after this update. But that's not all. They did fix an issue with some of the story quests and some other bug fixes related to quests in Umbar. Well, Umbar and Gondor, new content in the Corsairs of Umbar expansion is what I mean. And there's one more maybe fix. They don't actually list it in the patch notes, so based on the crafting overhaul, I would not bet on this actually coming to the game. But they might have fixed where you will be able to use your Flame of Ancalamir again. So if you see here, the Flame of Ancalamir has a minimum level of 151, yet the level cap in the game is 150. They actually had to disable it because of some issues with old gear still being able to be disenchanted for embers when it should have been motes. And there are even some issues with stuff that you can barter for embers right now. So update 38.0.1 here will have fixed those issues, but they don't directly specify that the Flame of Ancalamir will be usable again after this update. So along with that, there are again some general changes or fixes to what should have been converted to Motes of Enchantment yet was still Embers of Enchantment, and the other way around where like the level 141 loot boxes were giving you level 140 stuff instead of 141 plus stuff. And moving on, there is one class change. If you're curious, the class that actually has Catch a Breath is Guardian. Anyway, funny notes aside, the 8th season of the Legendary Item Reward Track will be starting with this patch. Depending when I actually get this video up, you might have an hour or two to make sure you claim all your rewards for Reward Track Season 7. Also, did you know that you can horizontally scale the Reward Track window now so it can go ultra wide? That actually makes claiming rewards a lot easier, and I'm still not the biggest fan of this UI layout, even though it matches a lot of different reward tracks in different games. I'm not a fan of it, but it is better. And on that note, you can actually also horizontally scale the legendary items panel. It doesn't make the biggest difference, and it's still kinda, if you ask me, rough and a suspicious number of Mithril coin symbols, but hey, at least you can do that now. And I saved the absolute best for last because everybody loves loot boxes, right? Well, we have some new cosmetics for loot boxes. So it's called the Harmonious set here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we actually get any preview of what they look like, but it'll have some Avatar cosmetic steed, war steed, falcon cosmetic pet. That one could be interesting. And then new housing items with a falcon perch, miniature tree in winter, and a planter in spring. You'll be able to also get these for your Figments of Splendor from Rowan Raspberry. Oh, and it looks like there are some exclusive items unavailable for barter, which include Seaside Sand Lurker and 3 macaw-themed housing items, which I would guess actually match the monkeys we have in Umbar. Hopefully that's not a spoiler to anyone. But also to point out some of the old cosmetics this does mean for Rowan Raspberry will be moved to the Curator. And I realized I hadn't actually pointed out what you can get from the new reward track, which is going to include for the unique cosmetic rewards. It's going to include the sculpture garden here that has an Elvish Pavilion, a Tome of the Young Moose, Tome of the Frost Tusk Youngling, and a red painted skeleton mount. Seems like a fairly random assortment of things, especially with a couple cosmetics that you might generally associate more north than our new area in Umbar, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to just have, I guess, random stuff in the reward track that's not related to the new expansion that just launched. Unless you actually do see Moose and Frost Tusk in Umbar. And I think that is the point to call it for this video, so I hope you all enjoyed it and learned something useful, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, everyone.